The great ancient Greek historian Herodotus is the first to use the word demokratia to describe this new radical form of government. Yet there is growing archaeological evidence to suggest that democratic ideas existed before Athens.
I mean, it's been interesting in the last couple of years. I've been doing more research about the development of democracy in the early city-states of and those Mesopotamian states, which are kind of relevant to the introduction of democracy in Iraq at the moment.
This view is shared by Professor John Keane, who established the Centre for Democracy at Westminster University in London and sees democracy consisting of two phases.
I think in this first phase of democracy, democracy means self-government through the assembly. And assemblies are an Eastern invention. Lots of archaeological evidence now is surfacing of assemblies in the cities and also the countryside of Syria, Mesopotamia. And they get transported partly to the east, to what is today Pakistan and Western India, and they also get transported to the west. And they get picked up in the Hellenic world, where particularly the Athenians claim demokratia as their own invention.
By far the most complete and reliable evidence survives from ancient Athens in the 5th and 4th centuries BC. Not only is there a huge amount of archaeological evidence still being discovered, but completed texts still survive. Philosophies by Plato and Aristotle, histories by Herodotus, Plutarch and Thucydides, comedies and tragedies by Aristophanes, Sophocles, Euripides and Aeschylus.
It's thanks to the Athenians that we have the best documented account of all the trimmings and trappings of democracy. And there the idea is that democracy is a special, unusual kind of polity where male citizens who consider themselves as equals, women are excluded, foreigners are excluded, slaves are not included, that these male equals can gather in the paniques, in the assembly, and they can put motions, they can debate them, and they can agree by a show of hands or placing a piece of pottery in a jar. They can agree on what's to be done. And this was an extraordinary invention.
I wanted to find out more about ancient Greek democracy and how it compared to democracy today. So before I flew out to Athens, I interviewed Dr. David Pritchard from the Classics Department at Sydney University.
The basic difference is that we have a representative form of democracy, whereas ancient Greece had a participatory form of democracy. So in our representative system, we elect representatives to conduct politics on our behalf. This means that ordinary voters don't have any role in the day-to-day conducting of politics, and that often our only political activity comes in the form of voting in elections or in referendums. In classical Greece, by contrast, participants were involved in a very real way in day-to-day politics. They were able to turn up to the regular meetings of the Assembly and the Council where public business was discussed. At those meetings they were free to speak themselves about political issues or what the city should do, and they also voted on what the city should do itself. So they had a direct role in the discussion of politics and also in political decision making.
I finally made it to Athens and met my guide Gemma on top of one of the hills that surrounds the city. Gemma explained to me that the ancient Greeks had to adapt to the conditions around them. The mountainous terrain and lack of rainfall had forced them to develop intensive farming techniques where certain crops would flourish under these conditions. This led to long sea trade and the introduction of coinage. It developed a merchant class that became affluent and changed the dynamics within the city-states.
Well, I think that Athens was the kind of town that was made for democracy. It really depended to a large extent. The power was in the hands of traders and entrepreneurs of various kinds. The aristocrats who had been in power there, hadn't adapted well to changing conditions. And I think this is one of the useful aspects of democracy all down its history, is that, you know, it's very good at adapting to changing conditions.
The Greeks settled into self-sufficient communities known as city-states. Their language, culture and religion bound them together, and by the 8th century BC they managed to transform Millennium script from the Phoenicians and streamlined it by adding vowels to represent their language. It revolutionised the way people communicated, as it allowed a permanent and accurate record that was universally understood within the Greek world.
Ordinary Athenians perceived the possibility of democracy through slow political developments, such as the introduction of magistracies, and the need for such a development because of the bad behaviour of their upper class. In the course of the 6th century, members of that class were forever fighting with each other, hashing up public affairs, getting themselves and ordinary people killed. And at the end of those shenanigans, at the end of a century of shenanigans, ordinary Athenians said enough is enough, and really it's a time that we're involved in public life because we feel that our involvement will ensure that public life is managed more successfully.